Hello there, my beautiful friends. If you have recently seen the inside of the Limecrime Venus XL2 palette and you were not impressed by the color scheme, then you're just like me. So I went ahead and redesigned the palette to fit my liking a little bit better. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. So it is January 1st, 2019, so Happy New Year to everyone out there. I hope you had an amazing New Year's Eve and an amazing New Year's. I literally just sat around and ate peppermint ganache brownies and watched Black Mirror, but nothing wrong with that. It was very low-key. But I hope that your New Year's was absolutely amazing. So on the day that I'm filming this, Chenro dropped a promo photo, or a sneak peek, if you will, of the new Limecrime Venus XL2 palette. And last year Limecrime came out with the Venus XL. I reviewed that. It was, I think it's my most viewed video actually on my channel. I don't know how, because that video is kind of trash, but I really liked that palette and I used it so much that I've hit pan on 3 shades in it. But recently they announced that they were going to be coming out with this Venus XL2 palette, and if you don't already know, the original Venus XL was based on the original Venus palette. The color scheme was basically the same thing, just expanded. So everyone, I think, was assuming that the Venus XL2 was going to be based on the Venus 2, because that would make sense. We're using our noggins out here in 2019. But today, the actual inside of the palette was dropped. And granted, the outside of the palette was dropped a couple days ago by Limecrime. The packaging fits the normal Venus lineup that they have going on, but this packaging in particular has these cute little peaches all over it, so I think that people were really excited to see what the inside looked like. And from what I can tell, and from a lot of the comments that I read, people were not feeling this palette, and honestly, I wasn't really feeling it either. Now, am I probably gonna buy it? Yeah, I probably am, just because I want to review it and I want to compare it to the original Venus XL. I kind of want to do a video on it, and that's mainly the reason why I want to buy it, which might be kind of dumb, but it's what I want to do, so I'm gonna do it. But when I saw this palette today, I knew I had to hop on camera and redesign this guy, because this does not look anything like the Venus 2 palette. Honestly, when I saw them drop the photo of this palette, I legit thought that they just dropped a photo of the Venus XL. Like, these look exactly the same to me in my head. Maybe they're like a tinge off as far as tones go, but they look so incredibly similar that I don't think that they needed both of these palettes in their line. So I went ahead and redesigned this guy. So rambling aside here, let's go ahead and jump on into what I redesigned for the Venus XL2 palette. And without further ado, this is what I came up with. Now I'm gonna go ahead and compare the original Venus 2 to this recreated Venus XL2 that I created in my head here, and you can see that I basically just drew inspiration from the original palette, because that's what Limecrime did with the original Venus XL palette. So I would assume that the Venus XL2 would also just be a continuation of wanting to expand on these previously made palettes. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong for that, but that's just how I'm seeing these palettes. But let's jump into the shades that I picked for this palette, and all of these shades I feel like represent the Venus XL2 perfectly in my opinion, and I really wish we would have seen something like this from them. And quick note, in the promo photo that was dropped today, we could basically see all of the names for these new shades and for this new palette except for one, so I left that one as question mark, question mark, question mark, but the rest of them we know the names of. So in the Venus XL2 palette, it looks like there is a beautiful kind of mid-toned warm cherry blossom looking pink, which is called In Bloom, and I do really like this color, but it looks so similar to all of the shades that are in the Venus XL. Like, literally there are a bunch of shades in the Venus XL that look just like this, so it looks almost the freaking same. But I went ahead and changed In Bloom from that mid-tone kind of warm pink to a beautiful cool toned dusty kind of mauvey purple shade. So in the Venus 2 palette, there was a lot of grungier, kind of smokier, cool toned-ish shades that really reminded me of smoky eyeshadow looks, and I feel like that palette could have used some dusty mauvey purples, so I decided to put this guy in there because I think that this is exactly what the Venus 2 needed. And to me, when I think about these XL palettes, it's basically like an expansion of the original palette, so I basically think of it as a continuation of shades that would have been in the original palette but maybe just didn't make the cut. So for me, this mauvey cool toned dusty purple purple would have been absolutely perfect with the original color scheme, so I definitely had to put it in here. So the second shade in the Venus XL2 palette is called Crown, and I went ahead and just basically kept to the shade. It looks like it's a beautiful kind of peachy rose gold high shine metallic. To me, the metallics in this palette look like they're going to be the same type of metallics that were in the Venus 3, which a lot of people hated, but I personally loved. Basically like sheer glitter toppers that you can build up to be a bit more pigmented, but they are so beautiful and wet and shiny looking on the eyes, so I really hope that that's the formula that they decided to include in this palette. The metallics that they included in the Venus XL were extremely lackluster, to say the least. They left a lot to be desired, and I really enjoy the formula that they came out with in the Venus 3 as far as the kind of glittery top coat metallics go, and these look like they have the same exact texture. Granted, we haven't seen swatches yet, but they look extremely similar to me in the pan, so I am crossing my fingers that it's going to be this formula. But I left that one alone because I think it's really beautiful, and I think that it goes along nicely with some of the rest of the shades that I picked out. I also decided to leave alone the third shade in the palette, which to me matches up with the Venus 2 scheme perfectly. There is a shade in the Venus 2 called Marsh, which is a beautiful like satiny, deeper toned sage, if you will, and they decided to put in a shade in the Venus XL2 called Sage, which looks to be just a plain matte, but it's a little bit lighter than Marsh and it's a little bit more khaki toned, so I really like that color. I think it would be beautiful to start out any kind of smoky, mossy looking grungy look with. I think it would be absolutely beautiful for that, and I think it works nicely with the rest of the Venus 2 colors. So the next shade in the Venus XL2 is Thorn, which is kind of like a bronzy metallic shade, and there were so many of these tones in the Venus XL. I mean, literally I can do without this shade. If I never got a shade like this again, I would be completely okay. But nonetheless, I decided to change Thorn from that kind of brassy rose gold that's a little bit more burnt looking to a beautiful margarita looking metallic. This would be a glittery kind of top coat metallic that I personally like, and I wanted the shade to be really opalescent, so when you're looking straight forward it would kind of just look like a white metallic, but then when you turn your face it would have this beautiful like lime green and pink duochrome sparkly shift to it. I live and die for shades like this, and really there aren't that many on the market. I think that this would have matched up with the green color scheme that they have going on with the original Venus palette, and I think this would have worked nicely as well with some of the other shades that I chose for this guy. So now we're moving on to the shade Ripe in the Venus XL2. This just looks like a plain, warm, kind of mustardy terracotta brown. I can do without shades like this. I don't ever reach for shades like this, but there are some kind of warm mustardy tones in the original Venus 2. So I do think that it matches with the color scheme from the Venus 2, but I decided to turn this into a metallic. I wanted a really shiny foiled metallic mustard shade in this palette because we have that beautiful mustard in the original Venus 2, and obviously if you look a little bit further down into the palette I created, we have another mustard shade, so I wanted a metallic, deeper, kind of brassy mustard that would go with some of the orangey and mustardy tones. And to finish up the top row here we have the shade Forbidden, which is a mid-toned kind of dusty peach, and I decided to just keep that because I think it works with the color scheme nicely. I think that the original Venus 2 had a lot of dusty, kind of smoky tones. I think that peaches play nicely with smokier tones. So let's go ahead and jump into the second row with the shade Stella, which is another peach, but it looks a little bit more pinky. This looks exactly like a shade from the Venus XL. I can't remember the name right now, but it looks like an exact dupe for that. It looks like they just basically put the same exact shade in this palette, so I don't understand that at all. And the pinkier tones that are in here, although I love and die for pink eyeshadow, I don't really think that they match the original Venus 2 color scheme. There ain't nothing smoky about a pink eyeshadow. So I decided to change Stella to a beautiful, mossy, mustardy, metallic green. I wanted this metallic to basically just look like moss on your eyeballs because I think it goes nicely with the shade Sage and some of the other green tones that I picked out, and I think that if you wanted to whip out your Venus 2 and use it with this palette, this metallic would be absolutely beautiful all over the lid with some of the other smoky, kind of dusty green shades as well. So moving on to the shade Myth in the second row, this just looks like your basic everyday silvery taupe shade, which is fine. I think that it definitely matches with the original Venus 2 scheme, but I decided to make it a little bit more interesting here. So I basically wanted to put in a new kind of shade of mustard, even though there is that beautiful matte mustard tone from the Venus 2, which is coincidentally called mustard, but I wanted something that would complement that and kind of work as a brighter version of that shade. This way, if you wanted to do an all mustard look, you would have two different variations of mustard between the two palettes to be able to do so. Technically, you would have 3 variations because I have the metallic mustard as well, so we literally got you covered here if you are into mustard eyeshadow. But this is a little bit more neon, a little bit brighter, but it definitely has that kind of smoky and dirty almost, but in a good way, if dirty can be a good thing. But it definitely has mustard, it's just a little bit more bright. So now we have the shade Eve, which again looks like a shade from the Venus XL, but this is absolutely beautiful. This is right up my alley. It's a gorgeous, like mid-toned pinky kind of magenta-y metallic, and it looks like it's that beautiful eyeshadow glittery topper formula. So I decided to basically keep that shade. I just amped it up a little bit and made it a little bit brighter. I don't know why I did that. I just like bright pink eyeshadow, so you know I had to throw one of those in here. Moving on to Laurel. This looks like a sandy brown metallic. It's nothing that interests me, so I decided to turn Laurel into a mid-toned matte pinky peach. It's a little bit more bright and a little bit more neon and a touch more pink than Forbidden, which was on the top row. I feel like this would play nicely with the purples in the palette, but I also feel like this would be really pretty with the sage kind of greeny colors. I really like green and pinks together, and I think that a nice matte kind of neon-esque peach with a sage green shade would be absolutely beautiful. And I wanted something to kind of complement the peaches that are on the front of the palette, because if you open up the palette and there's absolutely no peach in here, then you're being very misleading. So I had to throw in at least one peach, even though this shade does remind me of the Venus XL and it really doesn't remind me of the Venus 2 at all. I figured, you know, I had to throw it in here to match up with the peach theme. So the next shade in the Venus XL2 palette is called Radiant, and this is right up my alley. It is a pale powder baby pink that is almost white, but it's definitely pink, but it's almost there. It is that light. I love shades like this. I have so many single shades that are basically this color, but this does not match the original Venus 2 even in the slightest. I can't even think of a scenario where I would pair this shade up with basically any of the tones in the Venus 2. So I decided to switch this guy out for something that is essentially a polar opposite from the baby powder pink. I made a really deep plummy eggplant shade that you could use with the dusty purple. You could use it with some of these up and coming blue tones. I wanted something that would complement nicely with the purples, but I think you could also use this with some of the burnt oranges that I put in as well, and even the greens as well. So I love shades like this. I think that it matches nicely with the smoky tones that are in the Venus 2, and I also think this would pair nicely with some of the burnt terracotta shades from the original Venus 2. And the last shade in the second row is called Ivy, and from the looks of it, although maybe the color is a little bit off in this photo, it looks like it's almost a metallic kind of khaki, sage, dusty brown, kind of greeny tone. Lots of descriptive words for that guy. And although I do think that this color matches the Venus 2, I decided to make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more exciting. So I decided to make this guy a duochrome, and I wanted it to be a beautiful denim blue duochrome shade that flips to a golden sheen. This way it could pair nicely with some of the blue tones that we have in the original Venus 2. We have that gorgeous kind of mid-toned sky blue, which is called Filter, and then we have Pigeon and Marsh, which are a little bit more smoky and that are kind of on the mossy green teal side of things. I think this would be absolutely beautiful paired with those, or paired with some of the other shades that I picked out in this palette. And I feel like this just complements the rest of the color scheme really nicely. So let's go ahead and move into the bottom row, shall we? So getting started here, the first shade in the bottom row is called West, and again, looks like something from the Venus XL. You're gonna hear me say that a lot because this looks just like the Venus XL. But this is a metallic terracotta, kind of orangey, burnt brown. Man. How many of those have we seen in our lives before? But it does match with the Venus 2 because there are some terracotta, burnt orangey brown. But you know I had to change that up, so I decided to make West the most beautiful, metallic, sparkly, eggplant, pinky, purple shade you've ever seen, okay? I love this color. It is absolutely beautiful. I think this would look beautiful with obviously the first shade in the palette, which was In Bloom, that beautiful, dusty, purpley shade. This would work nicely with Radiant, the really, really smoky, deep eggplant tone. But I also think this would pair nicely with some of the mustards that we have, because yellow and purple do work together, even though they're basically polar opposites. I think that they're really beautiful together, and if you're into color and you're into matching together colors that people wouldn't necessarily put together, I think that this color combo would be beautiful. So now we're moving on into the shade Obscure, and this just looks like a basic pale white, which reminds me very much of a specific shade from the Venus XL, which was called Blank Page, or Blank Space? Blank Page. Blank Page. Like the Taylor Swift song. Or is that song called Blank blank space, blank page. I don't keep up with the girl, but nonetheless, they just had a basic white in there, and this looks like a basic white. So I decided to turn things up a little bit, and I wanted to make a complementary color to the shade Filter from the OG Venus 2 palette, which is that beautiful mid-toned sky blue. So instead of keeping the plain white, I decided to turn Obscure into a dusty, pale baby blue. I think this would be beautiful paired up with Filter. I think this would be beautiful paired up with a lot of the shades we see here. Obviously, this matches amazingly with Ivy, that beautiful denim blue that shifts to a gold sheen. And my original vision for this color basically was to use Obscure in the crease as your transition shade, deepen up the look with Filter, maybe throw a couple other deeper shades in there, and then pop Ivy all over the lid and have just the most beautiful baby blue and kind of golden duochrome look you've ever seen. So now we're coming up to the shade that I do not know the name of. The lady's finger is covering the name of it, so I just put question mark, question mark, question mark. So the shade is just called question mark in my book. But this is like basically the same exact shade as Stella, and honestly it kind of looks like Forbidden as well from earlier in the palette. And again, this is something we saw a lot in the Venus XL. So I decided to take it a completely different route here and basically make a matte version of the shade Marsh from the original Venus 2 palette. Marsh looks like a satin to me, or maybe even a metallic that's just not super bright. So I basically made a deeper and matte version of it to go with the shade Sage from earlier, to go with Thorn, to go with a few other tones. And my initial intention for this shade was to basically whip out your Venus 2 if you have it, and pair it up with Marsh, Pigeon, and Fly, which are all beautiful different tones of, I just dropped my phone, but nonetheless, the show must go on. Beautiful tones of green. So the next shade in the palette is called Phoenix, and honestly, I think that this shade works really nicely with the rest of the color scheme that I have going on. I think it works nicely with the original Venus 2, and I think it works nicely with my recreated version. So I decided to basically just keep it the same exact thing. I just turned up the intensity on it a little bit and made it a little bit more vibrant and a little bit more of like that beautiful pumpkin kind of squash terracotta orange. I didn't want a whole lot of brown in it. I just wanted it to be like a burnt orange. Second to last, we have the shade Locust. And although I do think that this shade represents Locust very well, I mean, it looks like the shade of a bug, I don't really get too excited about shades like this. I do not get out of bed for colors that are kind of this mid-toned khaki brown. Because Limecrime already put in Laurel and Ivy, which look like mid-toned greeny khaki brown shades that are kind of metallic and satiny looking, I don't think that this guy was necessary at all, but that's just my opinion. So instead of having that bronzy, khaki, metallic-y shade, I decided to change this into a beautiful, metallic, bright teal that would have kind of a blue duochrome to it. And I think this would work really beautifully with some of the original shades from the Venus 2. Obviously, we have that beautiful, smoky, metallic teal, which is called Pigeon. We have Filter, the mid-toned sky blue. Honestly, I think you could pair this up with any of the shades in the original Venus 2 palette, and it would work perfectly. And I think this pairs really nicely with some of the other shades that I put in the recreated one. And the final shade in the Venus XL2 palette is called Classic, and there was an exact shade that looked exactly like this in the Venus XL palette, and I think it was called New Classic. I might be wrong, but I know for a fact that there was an exact shade like this one in the Venus XL2, so that's not gonna fly over here. So I decided to change this color into something that matches nicely with a lot of the burnt orangey and terracotta tones that are in the OG Venus 2 palette and in my recreated one. I also wanted something that would match perfectly to Phoenix, so I decided to make basically just a metallic, sparkly version of Phoenix, a beautiful pumpkin colored metallic orange that obviously has a burnt undertone. So that is my recreation of the Venus XL2 palette. Granted, I don't know in particular if what they were trying to do was to make basically an expanded version of the Venus 2 palette. I have no idea. They haven't really said much about it yet, and we haven't seen swatches yet, so maybe these colors look completely different from the promo photo we've been shown. We only have one picture of this palette, so I could be totally wrong here and just taking a shot in the dark, but nonetheless, I personally see these XL palettes as an expansion of the original shades because that's what they did with the first one, so it would make sense that they would do it with the second. So I was really disappointed by this guy. I love the packaging, I love the idea of a peach palette, but these shades just look identical to the original Venus XL, which makes no sense in my head why they would do that. Nonetheless, I'm still interested in buying this guy, although I know I shouldn't, but a part of me still wants it just because of those beautiful metallic, super shiny topper, kind of glittery top coat shades. I love those. Everyone hates them, but I love them, and I really want more from Limecrime, so if they include those in this palette, then I'll probably somehow end up with this palette in my collection, but I really wish that it looked like the one that I recreated, because I think that it matches perfectly with the Venus 2, and I think it's the perfect expansion for the Venus 2. And I totally blanked on mentioning this at the beginning of the video, but obviously Makeup Struggles is the OG original creator of the palette redesign series here on YouTube. Many people have done it since her, but she is the original person who started it, so go ahead and watch her videos and give her some love because her redesigns are freaking phenomenal. But I know a lot of you really enjoy watching these, and I really hope that you enjoyed this redesign because I like this palette a lot. I'm really proud of it, and I think it's really unique looking, which is kind of hard to do here in the makeup industry. But please do let me know down in the comments, what are your thoughts on the Limecrime Venus XL2 palette? Do you own the original Venus XL, and do you think that this one looks similar? Because I own the original, and this looks like a spot-on dupe to me in my opinion, minus a few shades that are a little bit different. But with that being said, that is going to be wrapping up this video. I do hope that you consider subscribing if you have not already, and if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more, go ahead and give me a big old thumbs up and ring the notification bell. I would absolutely love it. But I hope that you are having an absolutely amazing and beautiful day wherever you are, and thank you so much for spending your time here today. I hope to see you next time. Bye!